It's the Anfield Wrap. Neil Atkinson, Rob Gutmann, Dan Austin and Glenn Price, who appears to have just started filming me at the start of that, or somebody. Who are you filming, Glenn?
I was just taking a photo.
Were you taking a photo of Gutmann?
No, just of the room.
Of the room?
Yeah.
You're chronicling your summer. Glenn Price's top summer.
No, just fun. I'm going to put it on Twitter now.
Okay, you put it on Twitter right now.
Bit of promo.
Excellent. No, it's into it. I'm into it. A bit of social. I love a bit of social. It is the Anfield Wrap, looking ahead to the summer and working through exactly what it is that's happening, all things to do with Liverpool at the moment. We're going to talk to you about the transfers on this show. We're also going to have a chat about Jordan Henderson and Emre Can, as they've got a few interesting little factors coming backwards and forwards at the moment. And it's 5 years since Liverpool, 5 whole years since Liverpool bought Jordan Henderson. We were all different men then, and we'll all move on from there. Also, we're going to be talking, as I said, about transfers. But I want to start with Peter Moore's comments last week, Glenn. And the comments were received by a lot of Liverpool supporters as the idea that it was a retreat of sorts. And I couldn't quite work out whether or not it was that treat or just a man making a couple of semi-sensible noises. What did you think?
Yeah, I didn't think it was worthy of the fume that was, seen. To be honest, the way I saw it was he was just staying on message with exactly what Klopp said. Klopp said that Liverpool do have money to spend, but they've always chosen to spend it wisely, as Peter Moore put it. I didn't see that much of a problem with that comment. More said specifically. There were a few things that we spoke to him on Anfield the day before. He officially started.
Did you like him?
He's thoroughly nice gentleman. You can tell he's been successful in whatever he does. He's got a mad accent, but I guess that's what happens when you live in America for the majority of your life. Just a nice guy, and you can tell why the owners have brought him, because he's just had past success wherever he's gone. From meeting him, he seems like a nice lad.
It's strange to me, but that he's made those sorts of noises, and sort of a few days on, Rob, we do appear to be going toe-to-toe with Manchester City for Virgil van Dijk. So it's whether or not he's making those noises from a diplomatic point of view, or whether or not there's something else.
Well, okay, let's just go back to the beginning, because the Van Dijk thing, the truth of that is yet to, I think, fully be revealed. So I know there's noises that we've matched a City bid. I'm sure maybe go on to discuss it in detail. I think it's more the tone of what Peter Moore said, why it resonated negatively, I think, for a lot of our fan base. And I think it jarred with me straight away as well. And I've written an impetuous, sparsely researched and ill-thought-out piece on the subject today, but quite a lot of words. But you can all enjoy that later. But what got to me was, look, we've lived in a universe for as long as we can all remember, but certainly during FSG's reign, where despite this sort of constant talk of under-promising, over-delivering, we haven't really seen much in the way of over-delivery in terms of transfer budgets and marquee-type names come our way. And every summer we've heard Liverpool managers from Brendan, Kenny, Jurgen going, look, it's not about what we spend. We can't spend what the big guys spend. It'd be silly to try and do that. We can be smarter. We're the guys who can win the unfair game. Watch us do this. That's been the mantra. There was a slight sea change, I think, in the briefings that were coming out from the local-based media a couple of months ago, with people saying Liverpool have a significant transfer war chest this summer, over 200 million possibly. Liverpool are going to go toe-to-toe. Liverpool are going to be there at all the big transfer conversations. It jarred because although he may actually have said it in just total rational, reasonable innocence, it did possibly suggest something of a pulling back from that position, back to the old position. Not that we don't think Liverpool won't spend a few quid, but they will accept their place in the transfer universe as second-class citizens.
I didn't judge it specifically from that comment, but what did have alarm bells going with what he said was, I'll read it out now, he goes, this was somewhere in that piece. It was, I trust Michael, being Michael Edwards, sporting director, implicitly to do a value proposition of particular players based on data analytics we have on them. Now,
my head fell on the table when I read that.
That's the thing that got me a bit worried, to be honest. Just because I think we've seen that process have flaws in the end, and there's certain things that data analytics can't gather on a player, and especially what Liverpool need.
Yeah, the numbers thing is probably the most worrying aspect of that. Just because, again, it sounds like possibly a man that doesn't necessarily know an awful lot about football will be making some football-related decisions, which has been a major criticism of the ownership since he came in.
He's not involved in the transfer part of that.
But
That was the whole thing of his appointment. The way it was explained to us that the transfer whole process lies with
Michael Edwards
and Klopp, and it's Peter Moore's job to ensure the checks don't bounce.
Okay.
So, I mean, but will be sort of taking this data in as part of that process.
Yeah, he's being kept abreast of the transfer situation.
I'll go back to you, Rob, on this. That strikes me as that can sort of concern you, and yet all the noises on Virgil van Dijk are that Liverpool, at least so far, are prepared to match anything that Manchester City are doing. Like, to the point that people are going, I've seen some people whose opinions I like sort of going, I can't believe we're prepared to spend this much money on Virgil van Dijk. And Liverpool do appear to be very committed to the idea that Van Dijk may well end up being, at least starting this summer, as Liverpool's highest wage earner, and he may well end up being he will end up being Liverpool's record signing by some distance.
Well, if it happens. Well, let's park the fact that he's called Virgil van Dijk, because that immediately sort of tempts a conversation about how good he is. And let's just imagine he's Alexis Sanchez and it's 2014 again, because this feels like a bit of a rerun of that in a certain sense. Not that he's not as much as he's a like-for-like replacement for Suarez, but he's a very important... The club clearly see him as a very, very important player to them, so they wouldn't even be considering these kind of wage levels and this kind of transfer fee. So they want him. He's a priority. We are not seeing second-choice options who come close to him.
Well, we're not necessarily... It doesn't sound like we're seeing a data analysis of this player, wherein it turns into, well, there's a certain point inside the field of this graph where we can draw a square and suddenly things are going outside the field of this graph. Because if we're all honest about it, I think Van Dijk looks great, but there are other centre backs in the world, and Liverpool could be looking for one of them. And yet this does look like an old style. Even if we don't win this, we are duking it out for Virgil van Dijk's signature.
I hope so. I hope we're doing this, and I hope I'm mature enough to take defeat if they really had a proper go well, with the rest of us are. But I'd like to know. Okay, here's what I'd like to know. Look, the computer. I agree. If they run this one through Michael Edwards' computer, it probably stopped at 30 million and 120 grand a week. So we're into the this is a unique opportunity syndrome, and this is what the market is saying. And do we want to be a competitor in the market? So maybe this is an example of Liverpool for the first time in many years bucking that trend, which I was talking about earlier, and if it happens, good. I do think if you seriously want to do it, you've got to either be looking to blow your opposition out the water, or at least force them to pay. Why not set the pace in it? Well, let's put it this way: what's the point in offering 200 grand and 1p for Virgil van Dijk if City and Chelsea have done that too? Because their wider proposition remains stronger than ours. Apart from unless he's got this love of Merseyside, this childhood dream to play for Liverpool, which I doubt those things are things. And I've heard Klopp, he's a Klopp guy. He very quickly could be an Antonio Conte guy because he's one hell of a manager. He could very quickly be a Pep Guardiola guy. So I'm not really buying that we've got any kind of USP here, apart from the fact, over those two clubs, apart from the fact that we can at least match, if not importantly improve on their offer.
Importantly improve? How do you improve on an offer beyond Manchester City and Chelsea?
Well, you kind of go... If I'm prepared to pay him 200 grand a week, why am I not prepared to pay him 220 grand?
If I'm prepared to pay him 150 grand a week, why am I not prepared to pay him 200 grand a week? Like, what if they were prepared to pay him 150 grand a week and someone's just said what you said and gone, well, we're prepared to... All right, well...
Maybe this has happened, you mean?
Yeah, maybe we've had that bit.
So maybe it has.
And so you end up, my thing on this is that you can end up sort of going, and then you can say, well, 220 grand a week, and then Manchester City could say, yeah, we're prepared to pay him 220 grand a week. And now you're sitting around... and now you're sitting around and you're saying to me, well, Neil, we've got to blow them out the water. Let's try and blow them out the water again. Okay, it's 240 grand a week.
I don't know.
But my point is, what I'm trying to say to you, Rob, is how do you blow Chelsea and City out the water?
You can't blow them out of the water, but you can make them. You can make them think they've got a range of other interests. I mean, I've noticed just sort of surveying the European transfer scene, Mbappe could have an interesting effect on people's budgets. If he's going to move this summer, it looks like it could be 110, even 120 million, at least euros kind of fee. that starts, and United, we're talking about Griezmann at a not dissimilar level for that out of bed. That starts to become 50% of even the megaliths teams' budgets. So you can get to a point where they go, Chelsea go, we have got the best defence in the league and 3 centre halves, and do we really need to blow this on the centre half? You know, there's Koulibaly for the 35 million and 180.
50.
Okay. Wevs, but then it leaves us with some money to go after Mendy at left back, or so you can't stop him if he's their number uno priority. But it's just what
so
we're just speculating.
Of course, Rob, we're very much just speculating. Yeah. I'm going to let other people speak in a minute. Do you think that he may actually be their numero uno? I think. I'm of the view he is Liverpool, Chelsea and Manchester City's number one target for centre-back. Rightly or wrongly.
Centre-back, yeah.
I think he is those 3 clubs' number one target for centre-back. So we're in a...
But it's other position priority question as well.
Become almost but you can say the same thing about us. You can say that we clearly need to buy 2 forwards. We clearly are looking to spend a lot of money on a central midfielder. We clearly need to go and buy a left back. We're in exactly the same boat that you're describing those clubs as being. So
it depends where their truth lies and where our truth lies.
Well, how you wait? Like everyone's number one prospect, number one target for centre back.
Yes, but do Chelsea say we will spend the most of our money if you're going to, let's just pick some figures out of the air. The most of our transfer budget will be spent. Our number one priority is a forward or a centre mid, or the possibility that Costa falls off a cliff or something like that. So we see, we've got Mbappe. City let's take City. City Mbappe is very much on the radar, right? From what we've heard, whether he still is, I don't know. And they go, you know what? If we go too far, Mbappe starts to become Mbappe and Van Dijk. Oh, and by the way, we need a left back as well, and Mendy's being talked about at 45 million. So we have to think carefully. He's definitely our best centre back option, Van Dijk, but he's our best centre back option at this opportunity cost. That's my point. And again, we're being theoretical, so it's hard to know where the truth lies.
Where the truth does lie, Dan, is that 2 of possibly 3, but I'd be stunned. But 2 of Manchester City, Liverpool are going to be disappointed and are going to feel as though they've lost out on the player. That's the reality of this situation of what's happening with Van Dijk.
Yeah, and then might also end up scrapping around for whoever the second choice is on all these lists.
And
so
it could be the same second choice.
If it's Koulibaly, like Rob's just said, then and say City get Van Dijk, then Liverpool and Chelsea are left maybe going after the same player then, and then it's a case of who finishes third out of this race for all the best centre backs on the continent.
It's good we've agreed the order.
I'm just taking it as an example.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
There's loads of different things as well that Liverpool are in competition with teams with, and it's not necessarily just English teams. But this one feels really important because it's sort of a seminal moment in sort of the hierarchy of the division going forward. Everyone's got settled managers now at the top of the division, including Arsenal now that the Wenger signed a new contract. Everyone can pay the money now because of, obviously to different degrees. We won't pay probably the same as Man City. We won't be like buying a player for a world record fee or something like that. But because of the money coming into the division, everyone can pay massive money. Everyone can attract players from the sort of third rung of European sides like Napoli or like Southampton or like those teams that aren't necessarily going to win a league title or win a European trophy. So in terms of who wins it, I think it's a big sort of psychological and attitude thing as well as just getting the footballer.
Because who wants it the most, I feel.
It seems to me like it could very well be. They're all going to sit down with him at some point, or they're all going to sit down with his family or his agent and talk to him. And it could very well just be who sweet talks him the most, who makes him feel wanted the most, who does he think comes across the best. Because if you're in his position there, you're in a big position of power where you're in absolutely no rush to make a decision. You've got 3 options, any of which are going to take you onto a higher level in your career, any of which are going to end up with you receiving loads and loads of money in your bank account every single month. So he can take his time over it, he can sit there, play them off each other, not necessarily for monetary gain or stuff like that, but to find out 100% absolutely which is the best for him. And I think another interesting facet of this as well is the injury thing. It's a little bit mad, the amount of money that's going around for him. Just sort of taken for granted
that he's just going to come back the same player.
He's going to come back the same player and will be able to step up to the new level. I'm not saying that I don't think he's good. I think he's great. But usually there's an element of risk, or there's people talking about, well, well, we do want to pay the money for him, but we're maybe going to pay a little bit less because we're not so sure how he'll recover and stuff like that. Whereas everyone just seems absolutely certain that he'll be fine and still wants him. So I think that's a little bit strange and would definitely be a slight worry if Liverpool end up going and paying like 60, 65 million for him. Obviously, everyone would be happy. We'd all think, oh, well, we've got this new defender and we've beaten these teams to him. But then you would secretly be waiting for that first game in August, thinking, let's just see his first sprint. Let's just see how he goes.
Yeah, it was an ankle injury, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Just to go over to you, Glenn, on this, the idea of when I say he's the first choice target for Chelsea, Man City and Liverpool, that's widely accepted, I think, amongst everyone who's covering each of those clubs. And then it becomes a conversation to a certain extent about the project, and I want to come on to talk more about the project in a minute, but it does turn into sort of when for instance, they're talking about the impact of securing the signing, you feel as though there's a conversation there, as Dan's saying, as to this becomes sort of because the amounts of money are likely to end up being very, very similar, it doesn't look as though it's a blow anyone out the water situation. It's almost going to come down to who's selling the project best.
Yeah, and we're seeing this more and more with footballs and transfers, especially with young players. Young players are almost taking their time and being picky in choosing where they move because of the situation that's on offer. We can think of Julian Brandt is a good example of that. Liverpool are interested in, Bayern Munich are interested in. He's actually turned Bayern Munich down in the past before because he felt he'd be better at Bayer Leverkusen still. So it is about what, managers, we're going to come on to this later, but managers are a bit of salesmen, and this is another prime example. You've got to convince a player who's maybe being offered more money or whatever, or the London life, and you've got to convince him why to come to Liverpool. And I think it was at the end of the season, Klopp was saying how his job was now, talking to people on the phone and talking about Liverpool and other things, and that's what he's got to do. He's got to talk about what he's got planned for Liverpool in the future. And the project thing is an idea because, when Klopp was first appointed, no one could be bothered with the idea of a project. You would add Brendan Rodgers, and that was seen as a 3-year project, and everyone was just tired, and we wanted someone proven. But I think even Klopp, especially with the owners didn't think they had a project with Klopp, because he said, according to the reports, he was impressed with the squad he had, but the reality was that it did need work and an investment, and it was going to take time to, for him to make his mark on the team. And yeah, Liverpool definitely is a project, but it's just the way Klopp's gone about it, which has been quite interesting.
This is sort of back to my point about Peter Moore, is it's a sales job, this. We need to create some kind of buzz around what we're doing. Okay, we've got Klopp. We're back in the Champions League. We showed some moments last year as a team that excited people, scored some goals. But at some point, we need to go with the next big thing. We are the next big thing. We're the team that is going places, and not just because we're just being a bit brash about it. That there's some tangible. There's almost bullshit that there's a bit more money than there is. I'm more than happy to see us do that.
If he does that, though, if he come out and said, oh yeah, we can compete with all these teams and we have got loads of money to spend, doesn't every club you go to then just throw 10 million on top of whoever it is that you're going to buy? Isn't him?
No, that's an old one. I addressed this in my superb article that you can read on the Anfield.
I sort of think him saying, oh well, we can't necessarily compete with City, isn't necessarily to do with Van Dijk thing. It might just be him sort of warning other football clubs, don't take the piss when they turn up, because English teams do have the piss taken out of them now. You see West Ham going and paying silly money for people, or Yannick Bolasie went to Everton for 28 million. So there is a stupid level of money now. So maybe it's just him being a bit like, yeah, we've got money, but we're not going to be stupid with it.
I've had this debate on internet forums for decades now. It feels like you must have been there at one or two of these debates, where it's basically if you let on you've got a few quid, you get stitched up. And you think about it logically for a minute. Rich people don't get rich if that's the case. They don't even get to buy cars at normal prices. People go, I've seen him walking in with his gold coat and his fur coat and his big gold chain. We'll have him off. The thing that wealth gives the clubs, businesses, organisations, individual is options. Options to go, you were taking the piss out of me on that price. Now I can go to your neighbour and he can have my riches. That's what they can do. It can cut either way. I don't think City have been taken for a ride. I think City have overpaid, but it's when they've decided they want to move a transfer that can't be moved. You know, you may be right that that's going to happen.
I think it can work both ways.
I think
in general there is a thing from clubs on the continent that if an English club comes knocking, whack some more money on because they've got it, and I think that is a thing that might well be happening, But on the other hand, I don't think it necessarily happens club by club. I could be wrong. But on the project thing, when you say, Rob, about, there's a bit of bullshit going on and all of this, but isn't that also external as well as internal? So the manager also has to, now a football manager, more accurately, not just our manager, but a football manager has to bullshit the supporters a little bit, and almost, I think that this is quite, and also is almost certainly doing the same thing to his players, that there is, manager as salesman is absolutely fine. We can be mature enough now to deal with it, but that means also simultaneously engaging with the fact that it's a project, which we didn't want. We wanted to win things now. Can we just sort this out? Can we just get moving? And yet now we're in sort of moving into year 3 of this project. I just think it's a really interesting sort of philosophical point, really, which is that, there's you've got to keep, therefore, to carry everyone along, you've got to keep hitting your self-imposed milestones of, and now we've done this, and now we've done this. So this year it was, let's come top 4. We came top 4. Klopp comes out in front of a microphone, is exceptionally bullish about Liverpool back amongst the European greats where they need to be. But what this needs now is that's just the milestone for next year. There has to be another milestone pulled on, because this project, you've got to see it move forward.
Yeah, the reason projects become projects is because reality becomes obvious to all concerned. So you can say at the beginning of the season, we're not about project, we're going to win the league this year, we're going to win the Champions League this year, and by October you're in third place and 10 points adrift, and you're struggling in the Champions League group phase. So you say that again, you sound like an idiot. So then you have to say, we're on a journey. We're on a journey, and you have to mean that. You have to go, okay, this is where we're going. It's just about adjustment of expectation. The only teams that don't need to worry about the project stuff, and I even started hearing noises from them last year, was the likes of City. And go, we are literally going to spend more than anyone else, so it's not a project. We're paying to win everything this year. That's the fucking project. Year 1, we do it. Although with Guardiola's very, very, very mediocre first season, we've already heard noises from them about, well, Guardiola's got to get the Guardiola-type player in, and so it's something of a project. Conte at Chelsea, Chelsea had a dreadful season. It had to be transitional. That was a bloody project that suddenly turned into something that wasn't a project. Project is just code for it can't literally happen this year, guys. Bear with us. That's all that means. Stunned silence.
Yeah, I think he is right. It doesn't tend to come out in March, April, May. No one's talking about a project then. They do it over summer when they're trying to get people on board, and then they do it sort of towards maybe January, and then it goes a little bit quieter again when it's just about getting results and then seeing where you are at the end. It's only really, I'd be hesitant to call it an excuse, but it's about buying time. It's about saying no one who's top of the league or no one who's favourite to win a trophy talks about the project. It's teams, as you say, that are maybe 3rd to 5th or in the hunt for a cup, maybe in a quarter-final of a League Cup or something. They say, oh, well, this could be important for the young players and stuff like that. I think that the very upper echelons don't do the project talk, but at the minute we aren't the upper echelons, so we have to do the project talk, so it's fine. It's just that, as Glenn said before about Rodgers, when it becomes a bit sort of flowery, the talk around it, when it's all about philosophies and oh well, we need to get the right sort of way of playing, and it takes years, and we've all got to believe in it. And when it becomes a bit sort of hippie-ish at times, I think that's when people get a bit pissed off with it and think, I just want points. I just want some points and a big silver thing at the end.
Excellent Rory Smith piece on Real Madrid. He's written for the New York Times, Glenn, that Real Madrid's not a project. They haven't got a philosophy. They just win the European Cup.
Yes, they do. And with, I don't know whether I'm just naive on European football, but until a season ago, I'd never even heard of Casemiro and Danny Carvajal's, sort of an under the radar player. Yes, they do have these players, but they also have the best players in the world as well, in Bale and Ronaldo and all that. So that always helps, and I think that's what sort of Klopp was saying in his press conferences towards the end of the season. It was sort of like a sales pitch in that players are interested in the project. At Liverpool, he actually used the word project, and I thought that was sort of like a sales pitch, not just to convince the players to come to Liverpool who had offers on the other table, but to maybe turn the noses of other players as well to, switch their attentions.
On all of that, we mentioned Van Dijk. The other transfer that appears to be gaining a pace. We'll come on to talk about Naby Keita in a minute when we talk about the midfield. But Glenn, it's Mohamed Salah. It looks. A few people may have taken a flyer, possibly that it's pretty close, but it does look as though it's likely. It's now probably more likely than unlikely, and feel free to disagree with me, that Liverpool are going to break their transfer record and Mohamed Salah is going to be a Liverpool player at some point in the next 2 weeks.
Yep, it just seems a bit. It's only June, and there's not that far between the two clubs' value, stance in negotiations at the moment. So it does just seem a case of brinksmanship at this moment, and it will.
Will you take 34 million?
Yeah, 324. Yeah, and that was Partridge.
Yeah,
so yeah, it just does seem like it will get done eventually. You wonder how far a list he is down, because you look at Liverpool went after Pulisic, they liked Brandt. I'm trying to think of anyone else is, and then they've just. And Salah's now on the radar. There's probably other players further down the list.
Was Douglas Costa on the list, do you think, at any stage?
Not that I'm aware of, but maybe he was. Football clubs.
He doesn't kick it in the goal.
No,
don't make me go through this with you again. He doesn't kick it in the
Neil,
goal.
I forgot. I'm sorry.
He doesn't. He's a 4-goal a season, man. So if you're buying someone to play in the front three, and you're buying a lad who's genuinely looking at his numbers and he just scores 4 goals a season,
and Salah's coming off the best season of his career, and I think 19 goals in 41 appearances. That's quite a decent return,
and it's 1 and 2 in the league.
Yeah, and I was having this conversation with Rob before. It's like a player who's not got potential anymore. He's on the cusp of a rise. There's less risk associated because he's 24 now. It's sort of like a similar signing to Mane. I'm not saying he's going to have the same impact as Mane, but he's around that age now where he's been consistently doing the business for 2-3 years, and Liverpool are getting him at the time where it's value. It's good value, as I say. Still a little bit of a risk, but less of it. And
am I right in saying he's done the business in Europe a bit, Glenn? I have recollections of seeing him play against Real Madrid in the last couple of years, unless I dreamt this. And I'm sure
he's played for Roma in the latter stages of the Champions League, I think.
Yeah,
and he also played for Fiorentina for the season on loan and was very good there.
Yeah, no,
and I think he legally signed for Fiorentina and then got out of the contract somehow and went to Roma, and it was a big mad thing in Italy, and I think he might have got sued for it as well.
He went to the Court of Arbitration.
Yeah,
it was complicated.
It's Rob. Firstly, it's another example of Liverpool targeting a lad who's fast.
Yeah,
I think we're going to spend a lot of the summer talking about fast lads, which is good. It's also, when you mentioned in the sort of the value point there, I'm loath to worry too much about value at times, but he is on the cusp of something. He is the right age. I think he's the age that you should be looking at. I think you can make an argument around people like Markovic that Liverpool shouldn't be looking at 19 to 22. They should be looking at 22 to 24. And Salah's a very good example of that. It's very similar profile to Mane last season, apart from playing for a bigger club right now. To me, it's strikingly obvious. I mean, and often you can feel as though you're talking yourself into these, but I don't think I am. I think if you'd have presented me with all the facts, for instance, people's goals to games ratio at top leagues, and gone down the list, I'd like to think that I would logically have gone, what, him, that much? Why not?
Yeah, you don't know what as Glenn said, you don't know what the list was. If there was somebody better, more dynamic, or whether there is still in Salah's, the second in a list of 3 forwards they want to bring in, that he's not the marquee one. We don't know that, but he does seem. I think it's a no-brainer. We've certainly exhaustively scouted this guy because we nearly signed him 2 years ago. He falls into that habit which we've seen during the Edwards era, which is transfer targets just never go away, and I suspect we're signing Dahoud in 3 years' time, and as a mature player. The 23 to 25-year-old is the sweet spot, I think, with talent. It's nice. You often see the pattern of them being very highly rated at 19, doing okay, plateauing, and then beginning to go again. And it looks like Salah in the last 18 months is beginning to go again. It feels like he's been to fast track, and we could just be buying him on the edge of something very significant. If I've got any reservations at all stylistically, is whenever I've watched him in the past and I've re-researched on his best bits on the YouTube, is he looks very much a counter-attacking gem. I wonder how he aids you when a team is sat very, very low blocked, as they say, against you, and you're trying to break them down. What's his role then? I mean, I'm seeing he's quite poachy in the box. If you look at his goal roster last season, quite a few on rebounds from 6 yards, a few back post headers. But I do wonder what he gives you in those situations, and others may know better.
It might just be a case that if he's on one side, if he's on the left and Mane's on the right, one of them drags the defence one way, which then leaves space on the other side for the other
people.
One. Yeah.
If
If one of them's running towards the corner flag on one side, everyone has to move over. So Mane's got space on the other. It's the only thing I could think of. And I think it's maybe to do with the fact that he was bringing Moreno on for sort of 10 minutes of games towards the end of this season. Just, I think, to run. Just to say run, peg them back a little bit. Try and make a bit of space for the lads that are actually good at football in the middle. So it might be that. I whenever I've seen him, I just like the fact that he runs with the ball. He runs with the ball forwards. Which
he carries the ball out.
Yeah, which we've got a bit of now anyway, but I'm not really used to in a Liverpool team. Like the best Liverpool teams that I've seen, sort of Benitez teams, and then like sort of like the Dalglish Cup run team, and even Rodgers one to a certain extent. There wasn't very much picking the ball up and just going as quick as you can. It was more to do with passing the ball, working it around, finding an opening sort of thing, or just giving it to a boss lad, Torres, Suarez, whoever it was. So I think it's nice to have that on, or it would be nice to have that on both sides, or if one of them's gone, the other one's there. I think the only major worry about that is them both possibly going to the African Cup of Nations at the same time, and then what you do. What you do for
that's
them
18 months down the line problem. I can't be worried about 18 months down the line.
Is the idea then you think that they get him now, they haven't got to worry about it for a year, and then next year they reassess and maybe go and get another one?
I think they're going to get another one anyway.
Okay, you think they'll get another one now?
Yeah.
Another version of those two, another really quick wide lad?
Yeah, broadly. Or
well, if they do that, that's fine by me then,
another quick forward.
I'll tell you what, I hope they give him November, December off, this lad. Ready in time for the January, this definitely non-African guy.
But it's a long time away, that January. It's 2 January's time. We can't be worrying about that now, but I think, it wouldn't surprise me if they're going to buy 2 fast lads, to be honest with you, two lads who play in a front 3, because I think certainly if the talk is dropping Coutinho back into midfield, then you're already one light anyway, and then you're looking for another one for cover, and then you're sort of scouting around. They bought the Sri Lanka boy, and they go from there. Talking about dropping people back into midfield, Glenn, it's the anniversary this week of Henderson signing for Liverpool. It's 5 years ago. It's a strange sort of situation where he's effectively exchanged one set of question marks for another. I don't think now there's much reasonable discussion about whether or not he's good enough to play for a side that's going to finish top 4, to start every week regularly for a side that's finishing top 4. I don't think there's much reasonable discussion as to whether or not he's a good Liverpool captain. I think he's shown this season he's done a good job, and he does a good job off the field. It may not prove to be a great Liverpool captain, but these things are very subjective. He's certainly not bad at the thing. But in clearing those question marks up, he's now left himself with a pretty significant fitness question mark.
Yep, it's not just this season as well. The last season was a nightmare for him as well. So, and before that, he was relatively okay with his injury record.
It was great. It was really strong, really strong.
And then these last 2 seasons of, he called the season with his foot, the initial foot injury, like the worst season of his life. This must just be equally as frustrating, because his performances at the start of the season in a new role were brilliant. He was one of Liverpool's best performers this season, up until the mysterious foot injury and the kick in training. The thing with Henderson, when he came in, it was 20 million or whatever. He was getting absolutely pelted in that first season, because he was, along with him and Stuart Downing, and Andy Carroll, Kenny was getting criticised left, right, and centre for just a waste of money, and you did feel sorry for him, because he was shifted out onto the right to accommodate Charlie Adam.
We'll gloss over that, Glenn.
Sends a shiver down the spine.
He had played there at Sunderland. I think that's a young player curse.
Yeah,
he played on the left, I think, didn't he, as well, in the FA Cup semi-final? Sure, he played on the left of midfield. Yeah. Jay Speedham was at centre mid.
And Rodgers played him at fullback.
Yeah, he's played everywhere. Even Rodgers, you look at him, he was sort of I didn't realise how much he was in the box when you rewatch some of Liverpool's game under Rodgers. Yeah, so he was involved in that. He's played everywhere, and I think it's quite good that he's found sort of a settled role, which was this number 6 role, which was planned at the start of pre-season. But that then again, that was because Liverpool didn't get Mohamed Dahoud, who's a defensive midfielder. So they were looking at trying to bring in another player for that position. I just think it is a shame that he's got injured again, but I do think because of what he showed last season, it would be too early to give up on. I'd still put it this way: I'd still have him first choice start of next season if he's fit to play that number 6 role.
I think what will have jarred though is the 2 seasons with substantive absences has to have made people sit up and take notice. And you'd be negligent not to say we need to at least cover Jordan Henderson now. At least cover, if not contingency replace, and treat it as an amazing bonus if the player returns to his former fitness levels, and go, that's just fantastic. He's first pick. Wow, look at our abundance of riches. But it's not a million miles off the Sturridge situation. Whereas great little cameos from Sturridge at the end of the season. Anybody at Liverpool who's thinking he could lead our line next season would want dismissing, because you cannot count on him. I think if you're looking from Jordan Henderson's point of view personally, it's a bit of a make or break season. There's no getting away from that. He needs to be substantively fit. If he isn't, what next for him? Could he see out a career at Liverpool as the new Lucas, i.e. a lad who's older than his years but still a fantastic contributor? It's interesting what you say about him in the Rodgers era, where he was seen much more as a box-to-box player. We often sort of used to talk about him. Could he be Lampard-esque as he got older? Would his goals increase? I think, managers have seen his maturity action and pulled him further back. But I think it also possibly has been a factor of those injuries. I wonder if they've wanted him to play slightly more within himself in a certain sense, and the number 6 role suits that. And so maybe he will be able to manage his body through this and become, I don't know, a fulcrum that doesn't need to work as hard in training perhaps as other players might be. I don't know. It's very interesting to say. It's ridiculous to write him off, but I also think you can't write him in. What's
noticeable, Rob, though, is it seems pretty clear what sort of players Liverpool are being linked with this summer. There's no alternative for his position that's been linked.
No, Klopp's interesting when he talks about defensive mids. He's almost like won't acknowledge the position, will he? Which
I've got a lot of time for.
Yeah. And I think he's sort of closer to that school of Andrea Villas-Boas sort of popularised a little bit when he came to the Premier League, with almost the carousel principle in centre mid. Whereas,
he very much did not have Henderson as part of the carousel.
No, he didn't. He anchored him, and I wonder if that was to do with some of Henderson's latent fitness issues, that was the case. Emre Can, because he doesn't want him box to box, he wants to control that.
But he did, I would say again, when Can sat, and Can didn't, for instance, Lucas has sat, Can sat, people have sat who aren't Henderson.
Come out a bit more than Henderson did. I don't know. It just seems.
I'm giving you all my sceptical face.
Yeah,
it's not fair, is it?
It just seemed more fluid than calling it a Makaleli kind of role.
But I think it's been more fluid than that when Henderson, and he's very involved in the team played higher. I think when Henderson was on the pitch, they felt as though what they also didn't do was do 2 sitting, which we have done at times. When, for instance, he's had 2 of them sitting together, and people coming and helping out. Whereas it was always very much it's Henderson who is the deepest, and the rest of you can go, because I think he trusts Henderson's pace move, whether he's right or wrong. Henderson's mobility to go from left back to right back, where he doesn't do that with Emre Can or Lucas.
I think maybe the answer is the fact that because he doesn't really rate the defensive midfield position as a specialist position, he thinks they can all bloody well do that. That's just doing the dishes, If Emre Can, if Henderson's fit, he's my first choice and captain there. If he's not, Emre slots in. And if we've got both who have to rest one, Gini Wijnaldum can do a stint there. He certainly has done. It's not hard, lads. And it may even be that Naby, if we sign someone like Naby Keita, although he's very box-to-box, got some goals.
The one I would have been interested in was, we'll come on to Oxlade-Chamberlain in a second, but the idea that, because Oxlade-Chamberlain's done a little bit of it for Arsenal, because where I think that it falls down, I'm going to stay with you, Rob, where I think it falls down in Henderson's absence. Where I think we struggled was the speed the ball was moving out of midfield. So where Henderson would do stuff quicker, more in front of a player, in one touch where others had used two, in two touches where others had used three. There was a note, like for instance, I think one of the reasons why we're all slightly lamenting the fullbacks in the second half of the season is because it's not Henderson getting the ball to them that bit sharper. And sometimes you look a bit daft when you do that. There's been 3 or 4 times this season Henderson just kicked it out of touch because he's just trying to just shift it so fast and passing to where people should be without maybe at times checking they're there. But I do think there is a noticeable difference in terms of shifting the ball and bringing people into play faster when Henderson's on the pitch.
Yes. And I wonder, just thinking about it possibly for the first time, if we saw a feature of the final third of the season was Gini Wijnaldum springing some of our faster forwards from deep positions. I think the first one we all sat up and took notice of was against Spurs at Anfield. A sublime ball. Does he do it a couple of times against West Ham? There's another one that escapes me. But he definitely was, and that wasn't in his game earlier in the season.
So I wonder, go to you on Dan, I think it's interesting that we're not being linked with that. For instance, there's links to Keita, there's the links to Oxlade-Chamberlain. They've both been relatively serious links, it looks like. Keita, it looks like as though Oxlade-Chamberlain may well end up signing himself a new deal at Arsenal. But I wonder whether or not there is maybe the thing, the manager's thinking the same thing again. I'll fix this position within the squad. That I might, for instance, take Gini Wijnaldum and work with him throughout the summer and turn him into not just, even though he's playing deeper than we thought last season, he might go deeper again. And I might think to myself, you know what, if I work with Gini and work with Gini and work with Gini, he could end up being the footballer who sits into that space, is as athletic as Henderson, who offers me this sort of cover, whereas we all think he'll still play in front of someone.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely the case that he's not going to go and sign someone either as a replacement for him or as someone who can play when he's injured. I don't think it would make sense to take that sort of a hit to your budget and to add another lad into the squad who, as long as Henderson's fit, isn't really getting a game. And then, as you say, there are the other options there. I think it would be interesting to see who he'd do it with from the rest of the squad, because I think the best thing about Wijnaldum so far for me has been that he's a centre midfielder who's got in the box, who's been a threat going forward, which we've missed for years and years now. So I wouldn't really want him to be any deeper for any significant period of time. If Henderson was out for 6 weeks or whatever, I wouldn't necessarily want Wijnaldum moving back there. One thing I was wondering about was if Henderson's not playing, the captain's off the pitch. And I know he's spoken about having like various leaders in the squad before. But as long as Henderson's not playing, I think that makes him even more determined to have James Milner on the pitch. So could James Milner do it? Could James Milner be sometimes a left back, sometimes the number 6, moving the ball forward a bit quicker than maybe Can or Lucas would, especially if he gets a younger left back in? Could Milner play left back in the midweek game and then he moves to play the 6th role on the weekend? Would he be interested in doing that, or is there just someone else that you would not think of as capable of playing that role, who you just wouldn't have a picture of? Because last summer, if you'd have said in May, we could play James Milner left back, I think that would work, everyone would have thought you were taking the piss. But then he did it and it worked. So there might be someone else in the squad who you've got absolutely no notion could play that role. It might be a centre half. It could be anyone. Exactly. It could be a lad. It could be a lad who's decent with his feet and can't run anymore.
It was Joel Matip's position once upon a time.
He played defensive mid for Schalke.
There
you go. It could be something like that.
I'm interested about this in general, Glenn. I mean, not just in terms of this position, but I think it's interesting in general. Sort of looking at Klopp, that we presumed last season that we'd have seen last summer that we'd have seen everything the previous season, and he might pick one thing and move forward. And in the end, it became something quite different, not just in terms of a system, but in terms of a number of players would ended up in quite a different place. And there is every chance, isn't there, that whilst we're talking here, and it does appear that Naby Keita is Liverpool's first choice in centre midfield, but it may well be that what that does is that has a knock-on effect, that it sees another player shift somewhere else, it sees someone else come back. We've seen Coutinho last couple of games deeper. He's more than happy to spend a pre-season working on something new that he's seen out of a footballer's qualities, to think he can be better deployed somewhere else on the pitch.
I think he quite likes it. I think he's spoken in the past of enjoying training and stuff, and seeing the transfer market as not it's sort of maybe as a last resort to, and that's why I think Liverpool are so interested in Van Dijk, is that Lovren and Matip, especially, he talked about Lovren's ability to have a bad game every now and then, and I just think Klopp can't be dealing with that anymore as a first choice anyway. So they're going all out for Van Dijk, and I think Trent Alexander-Arnold's another interesting one. He's played literally everywhere for Liverpool's young side. Grujic as well. I think Grujic has played everywhere in this midfield whenever he's got on. He's had another year under his belt in England. His first year. So I think it's just mad, isn't it? Like, James Milner playing left back. We saw it the season before last. In the League Cup final, he went to left back, didn't he? And then against United in the Europa League. So he's obviously worked on that and he's planned on that, and it's obviously worked. But I think Klopp has tried things like, I remember Moreno coming on for 10 minutes and playing left wing. He mentioned that he'd impressed him in training and his levels were really good, but we didn't see that very much, did we? So he's worked as much as possible with it, but it just doesn't work eventually, and then he has to go into the transfer market and solve it. I think that's what we see with him.
There's something in this which makes me feel a little sort of semi-nostalgic, Rob. We've lost football because of its 7 substitutions, because of squad rotation, because of being able to be well stocked with 22 certain level of professionals, because midfield itself's broken into 2 rows when you and I were younger men. It was very much one, or at least it was written down and conceived of as one. You can maybe have a separate conversation on that, but we sort of lost the notion of the utility footballer a little bit, and it does strike me as quite interesting that we may well be seeing throughout this summer, in terms of both in the transfer market and also with the players he's already got, that Jurgen Klopp, I don't think he has lost that. I think he wants. You mentioned before the idea of a carousel in midfield, but I just sort of think he thinks his footballers, on the whole, should be pretty multifunctional. They should be able to do more than one thing. Certain players should be able to anyway.
Yeah, and I think you saw it really with the settling upon the front three early last season, which we were talking about before the show, the Firmino, Coutinho, and Lallana and Mane set up there. That at the end of the day, he wants good footballers on the pitch who can do all the things, all the running, all the pressing, all the shooting, everything. And I think you're seeing that with the midfield. Wijnaldum, he's a player. We all sat debating, what is he? He sat deep for the Dutch. He's been a guy arriving late in the box. He's been a wide man. Everything. I think it's where all this harks back to. It's Dutch total football. This is, and I think he's a student of those days, isn't he?
Just to stay on that, I think one of the things I think you've also seen is, for instance, a lot of the season, we were saying it's difficult for Can to play the deepest on his own. And a solution to that for a period of time and for those horrible away games and so on was Lucas. That Lucas will come and he'll sit broadly next to Can, maybe Can a little bit ahead of him, but then you would see, for instance, if they start to play some long ball football, the pair of them would go deep and so on and so forth. What struck me is, what you can actually look back on, his solution for those last 2 games was, we need to be able to shift the ball faster from deep. And the solution became, my solution, therefore, using the footballers I've got and the tactical acuity that I've got, is Emre Can sits deepest, but Coutinho's taking the ball off him at times. And I do, almost, and this is why I do think that, coming back to Henderson, having been here for 5 years, I do think he's still at times a little bit underrated, because I think he starts off trying to solve his Henderson problem with Can and Lucas, and he ends up solving his Henderson problem sort of with Can and Coutinho, in that it becomes, right, this lad's going to do all the creation of the tempo, the shifting it along, and Coutinho put 2 fantastic performances in the last 2 games of the season. Not just a goal return, but every stat. He was stunning, going past people, winning the ball, intercepting it, harrying people, the number of times he just got on the ball, how accurate he was with his passing all over the pitch, all of that. He put some fantastic performances in. But I do think that's him going, right, how do I solve that I haven't got somebody else to do that here? I'll have this fella and this fella. And I think, again, we might see more of that sort of thing as well.
You mean he used two to replace one?
Yeah, but that's fine. That's what I'm trying to say. That's.
I don't know. I think we can overstate how offensively creative Henderson was. I think there were times, yes, there was some very quick first time, swift thinking, some of those stunned side foot passes from Henderson. I'm thinking about Leicester was the archetype of it, where I think
Crystal Palace.
Yeah. We put of course, where he puts people away through incredible speed of thought.
That's what I mean. Like, for instance, the Sturridge goal at West Ham. We've basically got 2 midfielders who play that pass. and one's Jordan Henderson and the other one's Coutinho. And Coutinho's more likely to do it more often because he's that's the player he is. But it's almost as though he's thought, well, I'm picking this lad. This is what we'll do. This is how this will work. And this is how I solve this.
Yeah, because Chan's not likely to ping it from that position, right? Having said that, I did notice the default. The interesting thing when watching Wijnaldum closely, very much in his early days for Liverpool, I noticed how often he was collecting the ball, literally 5-10 yards from Henderson. That they seemed to be shuffling rather than looking for the quick penalty. They were quickly shuffling it from Henderson to Wijnaldum to Mane, moving up the pitch as a unit that way, which was quite exciting to watch, I felt, in a different sort of way. Whereas I think maybe as teams have become set against Liverpool, to get tempo going, they've looked to get the ping off quickly. Hence those Wijnaldum passes that dissect quickly, the Coutinho passes. That style we're talking about.
The other thing that strikes me with the lack of midfield links, Dan, is there's one midfield link going out, and this week it was Can to Juventus, which is this feeling that Can may still not sign a new deal, may still move on. Firstly, I would think therefore we'd be linked to more than one new midfielder, and one type of new midfielder. Number one, number two, it strikes me as that you'd have thought that this situation would have been resolved by now, one way or the other, especially given Can's performances towards the end of the campaign.
Yeah, I still don't think in the slightest that he'll be leaving, but it does make you think, well, what's the reason that it hasn't happened yet? And it might just be because they've had a busy end of season, and I assume he's on holiday at this point, and then he's going away with Germany, isn't he? So maybe they're just thinking, oh, well, we'll sort it when everyone's got free time and it's much easier. Or it might be that he's holding out for a bit more money off them than what they're willing to give him. It might be the agent doing a bit of talk around other European clubs. It might also be planning for in 4 to 5 years' time. You might be talking to these clubs now in a sense to see what their interest would be once he's done another contract at Liverpool or he's done another 3 years at Liverpool. I think the change in him is massive because we watched him at Sunderland away, and I would quite happily have never seen him ever again. Yes. Because it was one of the worst individual performances I've ever seen from a Liverpool player. He killed us dead. Just the pace, the speed, the thought was completely gone. But then he played himself back into fitness. He played himself back into form. He started playing different positions. He played some bigger games, which he had much more of an influence on. And the confidence just began to flow through him again. And it just looked like he believed in himself, and the players around him thought, oh, hang on, he is actually good, and trusted him a little bit more, and they worked more cohesively as a unit. And I think it's probably the quickest I've changed my mind about a player recently, to go from I really wouldn't have cared if he'd have left this summer. In fact, I would have probably been quite happy with it too. I would really like them to get this contract sorted as quickly as possible. I can understand now why someone of the ilk of Juventus would be interested in him. I think he's obviously shown that he's capable of playing for a top level football team in top level competitions and having an influence on big games. But also, I don't think there are that many other footballers like him, which might have its positives and its negatives, in that he's so sort of rough and ready and plays so in the moment and off instinct that maybe that wouldn't work it wouldn't work for Barcelona, where you've got to stand there, play a few passes, try and pick a gap and stuff like that. But as a different option for a top-level football team, I can completely get on board with the fact that they'll be all over him. So I think it is important that Liverpool get it done as quickly as possible. I absolutely think they will, because from all of what I've heard him say, he seems to like it here. Him and Klopp seems to have a really good relationship. He's becoming a more and more important player, and he's doing well for Germany at the same time. So I think and hope that it'll just get boxed off soon enough, and that explains why they only want the one centre midfielder.
Yeah, I think the thing with Chan's contract is that the negotiations have gone through so many different situations. There was the time when Can was struggling and not getting in the team, and then now he finds himself now, and the agent now holds a strong footing at the table. Can cemented himself as one of Liverpool's best players towards the end of the season. He was integral. And then you look at other people getting contracts. You see Liverpool giving $100,000 a week to Dejan Lovren, who may not necessarily be a starter next season. I think from what you gather, contract negotiations are really fragile situations, and a lot of things happen which affect them, which is, I guess, the case in any business. And they're very complicated, and they don't get necessarily done overnight, because there's so many permutations. So I think Liverpool won't want to let him go, and they will get a deal over the line. I just think his agent's in a stronger position, so they're probably going to be asking for more money than what they were originally asking for. Liverpool may not be willing to pay that, but Liverpool are going to have to reflect his importance in one way or another.
It's a big contract for Can. Is he 23 now? I think something like that. It's the big money earner of his career potentially, and as you both said, he's an enigma, and the goalposts are moving constantly on his actual value. So you can see, as Glenn said, you can exactly see why it's taken this long. And I can, although you think it's logical to presume, I can see it getting messy before it gets resolved, because I can see there being big gaps, because I think he's looking at himself going, I'm on an upward trajectory here. I'm going to go on the Germany team. Juve want me. I'm looking at the way the market for value players are going. I could be 140, 150 grand footballer, me. And Liverpool were going, fuck's sake, you would have been grateful for 50 grand back in November. Let's be right here. We signed you on probably 25 grand. It's probably his first contract. So there's going to be some big gaps. And yeah, I think we'll hear more and more links to other clubs, some genuine, some fictional, because the agent's job is to create that demand. But I'm going to just make a punt on it. I just think it's going to get messy and get resolved really quite late in the window.
Another complicated aspect is that, we'd probably consider his best position to be defensive midfielder, and Liverpool's current captain plays central midfield and would be first choice. So maybe, players are, assessing what's in for them in the future, and maybe Can doesn't see a regular starting 11 place for him.
It's an interesting one for Can. Come over to you, Dan. It's an interesting one for Can in the context of what Glenn said there around not just Henderson, but also if Liverpool are seriously linked to Naby Keita, and then the next thing on that is, and the manager might be playing Coutinho deeper. You can. Rob said to me before, he said you can quite easily imagine a situation next season where the first game Liverpool play Keita, if they've signed him, and Coutinho start in a midfield three, and that would mean last season's first choice midfield if Henderson, Wijnaldum and Lallana are all not selected in that side, or wouldn't be in that. It's quite easy if you are Emre Can to be able to go, well, hang on, there's every chance that there's six of us here battling away, and I feel as though if Henderson wants to play there, that's boxed, and you seem to love Lallana, Gaffer, and you all rate Philip Coutinho. It does become a little bit back to sort of the idea of sweet talking players, or players wanting to believe that they're very much wanted at this level of football, because they can all go and find another elite club to play for. Not just Liverpool aren't the only ones.
I see that point, but if he goes and plays for one of those other elite football clubs, it's not like they're all short on centre mids. if he were to go to Juventus, Juventus played the Champions League final on Saturday, and they had a midfield of Pjanic, Marquisio, Khedira.
Marquisio was on the bench, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, Marquisio.
Well, who's the third one then?
Bench?
Who's the third one at the end? Well, it's someone. So Marquisio's on the bench. Does he even get on the bench for that game? Does he start it? You don't know what. It might be a case of, oh, well, you play the Serie A game away to Palermo on the Wednesday, but then you're not playing the Champions League final because we've got all these lads that we've had for years. It's hard for him to go to a club either equivalent or better than Liverpool and know that he's going to be starting games. If you want to go back to Germany, if Bayern are looking for a centre mid because Alonso's retired, he's still got to get past Thiago. They've got Renato Sanchez that can't get a game. There's not another team where he could definitely get more money. That's definitely a step up from Liverpool, where he'd definitely be playing. So whatever his move is, it's a risk. It's sort of a risk to stay at Liverpool because he's not guaranteed 90 minutes every single week, especially if his form dips again or if he gets injured. But if he goes to one of them other teams, he can quite easily end up just as, not on the scrap heap, but just as the lad that comes off the bench. The lad that brings a bit of energy to it and stuff like that, which isn't what he's going to be looking for, as Rob said, is big contract at the age of 23 to take him through to the age of 28, 29.
If I was Can, the trouble is there's a huge window of possibility of what happens next in his career, between him sort of becoming this messy midfielder who's in and out of big team squads that he's hinted at being, or being this important midfielder who goes on to become a mainstay in the German team. You almost think that he signs his next big contract here, gets his money, and then perhaps if it doesn't go in the stellar direction, he doesn't nail down a place the way he wants, where his ambitions are best suited is in a top German side just below the level of Munich. I'm talking about Dortmund, now a Leipzig, a Schalke, where he absolutely is nailed on in that midfield, becomes the best midfield player in Germany that stays in Germany and stays in the national team.
Do you not think that's a big step down though, because he's already made that jump, hasn't he? He's already played for Leverkusen, done the step to Liverpool. If he goes back to a Leverkusen or a Schalke or whatever, is that not sort of him admitting defeat in a sense?
Oh no, I'm saying that's in 2 years' time fallback. If he doesn't nail a position now with one of these top sides.
It's hard building the squad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Chat about it. Harder than it looks.
Me,
Well, just in general.
it's yeah.
The project, man.
Maybe we should do some shows about this twice a week throughout the summer.
Maybe we should. Yes, all the stuff that you need, theanfieldwrap.com. 2 shows on transfers going twice a week right the way through the summer, hosted by Rob. Looking forward to doing one of them myself later on today. Loads and loads of stuff about all of that as it breaks as well. We'll be grabbing people like Glenn Price from holiday, if need be, over the phone to talk about, for instance, if Liverpool confirm the sign of Salah. Everything that you need, really, theanfieldwrap.com, both in terms of the writing, in terms of these shows, the free shows, and also in terms of the subscription shows. Thank you very much, Rob Gutmann, Dan Austin and Glenn Price. This has been the Anfield Wrap. We're in for a long, fascinating summer as to what Jurgen Klopp's going to do. I'm going to have to fill out my formation thing more and more as it wears on. It's the thing I have at every show now, Rob. I have my thing when we play circled and missing ones and everything. That's what I need. Everyone's craning the neck to see who's there. Been a pleasure as ever. That's the Anfield Wrap.